So, hi Myrna, good morning.
Good morning,
Nice,
Karen.
nice to see you.
You.
Um, yeah, so I asked you to come do this interview with me because there's some things happening in the Economic Justice Committee that we want the rest of Kehilla to know about. So first of all, I want to introduce myself to everyone who's listening. My name is Karen Richards, and I am the chair of the Economic Justice Committee of Kehilla. And this is Myrna Schwartz. Hi, Myrna. And Myrna is a very active member of the Economic Justice Committee, and she has important things to share. There are things that have happened recently that we want people to know about. I'm going to give a little background and just say that about 2 years ago, the Economic Justice Committee met at a retreat. And one of the priorities we identified for our work over the next few years was working on criminal justice locally, with a special focus on Santa Rita Jail. Um, and Myrna, I wanted to turn this over to you and see if you can kind of give some background to why we felt it was important to focus on Santa Rita.
Yeah. Well, it was actually, I credit our own Richard Spiegelman for having really highlighted the importance of this issue. At least he did, as far as I was concerned. Richard co-authored with several other people from Oakland Community Organizations, OCO. They co-authored a report called "What's Up with Our Jails." This was back in a couple of years ago, and it was absolutely eye-opening. It talked about the Santa Rita Jail in particular. This is the county jail of Alameda County. It is a mega jail. It is the fifth largest jail in the country, second largest in California.
Wow.
Capacity ranges between 3,000 and 4,000 people at any one time, and it is run by a Sheriff Ahern. It is his department that runs the county jail, and he has been reelected without opposition a few times. And unbeknownst to me, at least, and to most of my friends and relatives, all of whom are consider ourselves quite progressive, he's a terrifically right-wing character. And that jail is, in some circles, had been notorious for its abuses of inmates, and that ranges from overuse of isolation techniques, excessive use of force, unsanitary conditions, sleep deprivation, any number of things. Wow. Which have actually been highlighted in recent years by class action court and other court cases. So the county has been paying out all of this money to settle these this litigation that highlights these really horrendous conditions. And other activists have been talking about this for a while, but it was really Richard who brought this to our attention with that report that he co-authored. And at our retreat, the Economic Justice Committee, which was familiar with the report, decided, well, this was something we really wanted to move forward with.
Yeah, and I just want to pick up on some things you said and also highlight that there have been a number of deaths at Santa Rita Jail.
That's exactly right.
Can you describe that a little bit?
There have been a number of deaths. Again, the Santa Rita is known actually for the excessive number of deaths and deaths under suspicious circumstances, and that's one of the problems. One of the problems is that the sheriff is also the coroner. Believe it or not, this is one of the few counties where these things continue to be merged within the same office. And even though the district attorney is involved in death cases, it is the process is extraordinarily non-transparent. So what we know is that people have died from completed suicides, and the number of attempted and completed suicides is shockingly high at Santa Rita. And in addition to that, there has been excessive use of force. We know that in terms of the kinds of the restraints that are used, and there's also been inadequate training, and that's been documented as well. Again, all of the litigation and protests and news reports around these articles have really highlighted all of these issues.
Yeah, and so the dual role of being sheriff and coroner means that investigations, transparent investigations into these deaths is very, eroded. There's really are not adequate transparency. And actually, there's a film that we showed one time at on Yom Kippur, What Happened to Duane Armstrong.
That's right.
That is an example of a very suspicious death that happened.
Exactly. And the horror in that case that's highlighted is his mother and family who were given access to no information whatsoever for weeks and months afterwards. They weren't even given access to his clothing. And to this day, I don't know whether they've ever seen the videos that were actually available there in the jail. It's really been a horrible story.
Very horrible story. And I just want to say to the audience that we do have, EJC does have a copy of that film. And if anyone wants to see it, please feel free to email me, KarenRachels@gmail.com, and I will send you a copy of that video so you can watch it. So just moving on to what you said about litigation. So there was an important case that seems to be very relevant to what we want to talk about today, the Babu case that you wanted to explain.
That's right. So this is a class action suit, Babu, brought against the Sheriff's Department, the County Sheriff's Department, and the County Behavioral Health Service. I believe that they were specifically named in this because what it alleges is mistreatment, violation of human and constitutional rights of people with mental illness in the jails. It extends also, the report extends also to people with other behavioral illness and disabilities as well. So the scope is actually broader, but the focus of the Babu litigation and much of what we're going to talk about today is really on the fact that there are large numbers of people with mental illness, including serious mental illness, who are housed in the county jails. Nationwide, I mean, this is a national problem, of course. Nationwide, the statistics are something like 20 to 30% of people housed in jails are people with mental illness who need treatment for mental illness. And Santa Rita has consistently been at the high end of that range. Today, the estimate is 36% of the inmate population has mental illness that requires treatment.
Wow, well over a third.
That's right.
Right.
And so the conditions under which people with mental illness are treated and mistreated at Santa Rita were really highlighted in this class action suit. And then, so after 2 years, we have just recently had access to reports that were written by experts that had been mutually agreed upon by both sides of the case to actually look into the conditions at Santa Rita with respect to people with mental and other disabilities, and understand the nature of the problem, the extent of the problem, and the basic causes of the problem. And that is a very lengthy report, which I and others have read. And it highlights, among the things that it highlights the tremendous shortage of staff at Santa Rita Jail, adequate for dealing with this population, because it's extraordinarily expensive, costly in staff time to house and treat people with mental illness. People with mental illness, like other inmates, need to be transported everywhere in the jail so that both the inmates themselves, if they go off to a treatment area, or the treating clinician, if hopefully there is one, and often there isn't, is transported back and forth by custodial staff. So there's a huge, excessive need for staffing when people with mental illness are incarcerated and there's an attempt made to treat them. And that was just the beginning. So the staffing issue was highlighted here because it's long-standing. It had been known for a number of years Ironically, the sheriff has been unable to fill all of his positions over the years. There are currently something like 45 outstanding unfilled positions.
Wow. And of course,
and
we know.
I just want to say before I talk more about the positions and what ensued, that the report is also filled with other issues, documentation of all kinds of abuses that have to do with the sorts of things I mentioned. Suicides, way too many suicides, inadequate watch and prevention of suicides, inadequate housing so that people are thrown into isolation cells because there isn't sufficient de-escalation training and techniques around, on and on and on. And an important highlight in the Babu report, which equally should have been equally prominent with the staffing issues, is the fact that it is well known that jails are no place to treat people with mental illness, and it's critical that the county improve the treatment infrastructure in the community and its diversion programs for getting people out of jail so that the population of people with mental illness is reduced. Yeah. That was right there alongside the staffing needs in the report.
Yeah, and of course we know that the worst place to put someone with mental illness is in the jail, because it only exacerbates, and prison exacerbates the mental health problems. And actually people who go in who don't have so much mental illness, things get worse and can create mental illness when they're incarcerated under the conditions that you've described.
And that's right, and that's well documented that happens.
Yes. So let's just to be clear for people, the name of the report is the Babu report. BABU.
It's the report of experts in the Babu case. The expert consulting firm that was hired is Sabot, S-A-B-O-T, possibly Sabo. I haven't heard it pronounced right. So it's S-A-B-O-T. It has been going by the name the Sabot reports, often referring to the experts who wrote the report for the Babu litigation.
For the Babu litigation. Okay, so I imagine, since you said it's lengthy, that many people would not want to read it, but if people did want to read it, how would they get access to it?
There is a link. You can probably get it by just Googling the Babu case. I have forgotten the name of the of counsel, the law firm that brought the case. It's there on their website in all of it's written in several parts, I think 5 or 6 parts, and each part is a separate PDF there on the website. So if you can make your way to the attorney's website, for the plaintiffs, you'll find it. I wish I could remember. I'm sorry.
Well, why don't we do this? No, don't worry about that. Why don't we do this? If you can send me the link.
Yeah. And
I will again say my email address, and if people want that link, they can contact me.
That'd be great.
Okay. So my email address is Karen Rachels. You can see my name at the bottom of my picture here. KarenRachels@gmail.com. So Myrna, okay, so moving on, that's the importance of the Babu case to what then next transpired.
Yes. So
let's talk about what happened a couple of months ago with Sheriff Ahern.
So a couple of months ago, we learned that the sheriff's office, together with behavioral health, the county behavioral health department, has a proposal before the Board of Supervisors that the board will be considering, which is a proposal to authorize a mammoth increase in staffing at Santa Rita jails in response to the Babu litigation, they say. And it is, the numbers, it was changed at least once. The numbers that it wound up with something like 350 or so FTEs for the jail. I may be getting that wrong. and 100 for behavioral health workers, for clinicians. And this would be in the amount of the cost of this. The final cost in the final proposal is $106 million. It's not clear how that will be allocated over what period of time. $106 million. And they're asking for that authorization now, right, in the midst of a pandemic and facing with the county facing economic devastation. They are proposing they are asking for the board to authorize this monstrous staffing increase. And it was the community immediately rose up in protest. There were from all over. People were writing, and it started out as 85 million. So people may have seen references to the 85 million money grab by the sheriff. It was the way it was appearing all over the place. It then went up to 106 million, even worse. So there were letters sent, and there were calls, and the budget. The vote was postponed at least twice, maybe 3 times, and finally happened on May 12th. It was finally considered May 12th.
Okay, so like you said, the response was really strong, and we actually put out a call to Kehilla membership. And can you talk about the response that happened from Kehilla and from other communities that we were working with, like the Interfaith Coalition?
Yeah. So let me introduce the Interfaith Coalition for Justice in Our Jails. This is quite a new advocacy interfaith group that really Kehilla together, leaders at Kehilla and Plymouth, our neighboring church, the Church of Jazz and Justice, Plymouth together really spearheaded the founding of the Interfaith Coalition for Justice in Our Jails. And we now have 7 congregations that have signed on to the Statement of Principles, and many more who are involved with us in our action, and hopefully will join soon, and we're going to continue outreach. So the Interfaith Coalition for Justice in Our Jails, of course, Kehilla is a member of that, and through Kehilla and through the coalition, we put out calls to all of our friends at Kehilla and friends of friends at Kehilla, and we've had a wonderful response with phone calls and letter writing. Rabbi Dev sent letters on 3 different occasions because of this postponement of the vote. So in anticipation of the vote, they sent letters each time, and many of us attended the virtual meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We sent in official letters from the Interfaith Coalition and ourselves as individuals, and we were present at the meeting, as I say. And altogether, I think we estimate, did Richard say something like 100? The response was about 100-fold, something, 100 strong, something of that magnitude, I think.
Yeah, no, it was really, and we were also grateful and happy for the participation of Kehilla members, Rabbi Dev, and of course our partners outside of Kehilla.
Yes, and you know, I'm sorry, please go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I'm just talking about how grateful we were, and knowing part of the reason we're doing this interview is we want people to really share with people what happened with this, because we got so much response. I'm also wondering if you would be willing to talk about, before we go into what happened on May 12th, what it was we wanted instead. What were we wanting? Yeah.
So this is the critical thing. What we wanted instead. Well, there were. Let me come at this from 2 different directions. One was, I think everyone was horrified at the lack of transparency around this. There was no public discussion of the Babu case, the reports, no attempt for the community to weigh in on those, on whatever priorities were to emerge out of that case and that report. Because as I say, there was a call for staffing, but there was an obvious alternative that was highlighted in the report, which is, rather than or along with increasing staff to a smaller degree, act with all urgency to reduce the population of people with mental illness in the jails. And there are, we will hopefully talk about this, there are many ways to do this. People know how to do this. It's a matter of the will and the funding. And so that was a clear alternative. So people were concerned about the lack of transparency around, with respect to bringing in the community to a conversation about what the community feels like it needs to happen. And then at the board itself, at the meeting itself, we expected this alternative to somehow feature into what the discussion around the proposal would be. To our horror, it was not.
Right. So part of the discussion would be that there might be diversion programs outside of the context of a jail that could provide the kind of mental health treatment that these people would need.
That's exactly right. And so what's really needed is really I would say a threefold investment, although they're all tightly interrelated. One is with the setup of diversion programs, that is to say courts, specialized courts, that will consider cases where there are people who might be better served outside of jails, and so that they would not commit crimes again. So there would be diversion courts. There would be a robust community infrastructure to treat and support and where needed house people with mental illness so that they would get the care that they need. And then for those who are in jail, and there will always be some people in the jail, there's a robust reentry service that makes sure that people who leave the jail do so with the kinds of support and continuity and navigation into the sorts of community-based treatment programs that will help them to remain treated, get the treatment they need, remain treated, stay out of the jails. It's that wraparound service that's necessary that really is based on in the community. And there are models for this around the country that have worked. There's data showing that not only is this much more effective at reducing recidivism, so reducing the jail population, but also saving huge amounts of costs for the reasons that I was mentioning earlier. It's very expensive as well as counterproductive to keep people with mental illness in the jails.
Yeah, and actually that's an issue that the EJC and now in cooperation with the Interfaith Coalition worked on. One little part of it was trying to get Medi-Cal restored before people are released.
That's right.
They come back and they can get their medications and their mental health treatment on a continuous basis. So before we go into what happened on May 12th, I just want to ask you to highlight the fact that despite the request from Ahern for all this money, the jail population has actually decreased.
Yes.
At Santa Rita Jail. Can you talk about that, please? Yes.
This is the extraordinary, bitter irony here. So, for one thing, the jail population, for a variety of reasons, the jail population has been increasing quite steadily over recent years, even before COVID. So I said that its capacity is something between 3,000 and 4,000 people. It was before COVID and remained for many years between 3,000 and 2,500. And it was very close to that. At the start of COVID, it was 2,500. That was the 2,600. That was the capacity of the jail before COVID. And then came COVID and all the pressure, which we were part of. And again, I was going to jump in before to say thanks again to all of the folks at Kehilla who were heroic in pushing the district attorney and county officials with us to help move people who could safely leave the jails and into the community, to do so with all due alacrity because of the tremendous dangers to contagion that the jail poses. Right. So and that effort was successful. About a third of the inmates were and have been released, so that the jail population is now about 1,700. So it is at its all-time lowest. And it was at 2,500. It was before the start of COVID. The Babu experts who talked about staffing had access to that information, but they, for reasons that are completely unstated, assumed that that the population would go back to a level of 3,000, and they were considering staffing needs at that higher level. So not only did the report not consider what everybody is hoping for, which is now that we have managed to move people out of the jails, and hopefully will show that that this is actually a better alternative, that we can work to keep those levels low. The Babu estimates for what was needed with staffing assumes a much larger, almost twice as large, high population relative to what it is now.
So again, a major thank you to all the Kehilla members who joined us in sending postcards, to Nancy O'Malley, to get some of these people released. Can you just briefly say, people are being released at this point under COVID, but what were some of the categories of people who were being able to be released who really weren't, quote unquote, any danger to the community?
Well, one of the horrors is that at any given time in the jail, more than half of the people who are there have not been convicted yet of any crime whatsoever. It's absolutely horrific. I think this was the thing that really hooked me in to why we have to work on this, was this fact that these are people who should be presumed innocent. They don't have money to pay bail, or they are there because of technical violations of their bail conditions or whatever. They are pre-trial, often because the criminal proceedings get postponed and postponed and postponed. They can sit in the jail for days or months or even longer pre-trial. So that's one category that everybody was really trying to move out as quickly as possible. There were others who were there very close to their terms of release, their identified terms of release, and people were asking that they be looked at as well as potential people to be released, and those there on nonviolent misdemeanors, nonviolent crimes and other misdemeanors who could safely be moved out. So there were those categories that we were eager to see all the powers that be scrutinizing carefully and moving out. There's another category which complicates matters entirely, which is that somewhere between 400 and 500 of the inmates at Santa Rita jail are in fact federal detainees. The federal government pays the county to house, this was part of the AB 109 realignment process, pays them to house these federal detainees, and we, our county had no say on what their status would be during this COVID situation, and the federal government has been, as you can imagine, the Justice Department has been hopeless in moving people out in that category.
So thank you for that introduction to what then happened at the May 12th Alameda County Board of Supervisors meeting around Sheriff Ahern's proposal.
Yeah. So the proposal was read and explained very briefly by the two parties who brought the representatives of the sheriff's office and behavioral health. They explained its origin in the case and about the staffing, no considerations of any alternatives, nothing like that, and we went back to taking comments, the public comment section of the vote. So prior to taking the vote, they open up the mics to, in this case, 3 minutes each for people from the community in the audience to speak. This was, of course, on Zoom. There was no way of knowing. It was not obvious how many people were there on the call, but I will tell you that the media estimated that around 30 people spoke. We all thought that there were more than 30 people who spoke. People continued to speak even after the vote, and they were not counted. I myself tried to speak after the vote, but didn't even manage to get a chance. It just went on and on and on. So there was an outpouring of passionate voices speaking ahead of the vote and urging in every single case. I mean, this was the amazing thing. No one spoke in favor of the budget proposal specifically to authorize the staffing increases. Not one person spoke for it. Everyone spoke against it. And it was the speeches that people gave were extraordinarily moving. I listened to the whole thing. I was moved to tears several times. There were mental health advocates in the room, people who've experienced mental illness, some of who have been in jails in their lives. There were parents of children with severe mental illness who have been in and out of the Santa Rita jails. One woman spoke with just incredible power about to show that there is an alternative for people with who are experiencing serious mental illness and need to be in a secure facility. She highlighted that there is a place called Villa Fairmont, which is in San Leandro, which I think is something like 97 beds, and is a secure facility where her son had been treated. And she explained, right, that not all secure facilities are the same. This is nothing like the Santa Rita jail. Her son had expert and careful and sensitive attention, and in addition had the kind of wraparound services that I was saying. So when it came time to leave, people worked with him, a peer counselor, others worked with him to get him into the community services that he would need. So she, according to the mother of this child with mental illness, she held this up as a model for a humane way of dealing with the issue. Her son was repeatedly doing things when he was out on the streets, of things like breaking into cars to sleep for the night, and which is the sort of thing that gets people like this put into jails. And that's what he was doing. And so she was explaining what a humane alternative, a sensible alternative would look like. And what killed me is that she said that she and other advocates had been begging for years for another facility, at least one more like Villa Fontaine. That is, that there's a desperate need for more beds like this, among other services, and the county has not funded it. So it was just inconceivable for me to hear this. And others spoke as well. There were any number of mental health experts who were familiar with the situation, both inside the jails, the need for better wraparound services and so on, who spoke from firsthand experiences, spoke about what was missing from the jails, who spoke about what was present and could be exploited in the community, used for good purposes in the community, if only we put more resources into building capacity. It's capacity that we lack, capacity and coordination that's lacking, and we could make our community alternatives to jail work. And people, person after person, gave testimony to this from all walks of life. And then there were many people in the community who spoke about the terrible crisis that we're living through and how it impacts them and their families, begging with the Board of Supervisors, not now. I mean, if there is money to be allocated, right, consider the priorities of the moment, consider the exigencies of the moment, and not now. Why now? I mean, people were just incredulous. So it just went on and on like that. And then came the vote, and it was 2 votes against. Supervisors Wilma Chan and Keith Carson voted against. Supervisor Haggerty, Nate Miley, and then the final vote was Richard Valle, who's the president of the board, and who in the past has been sympathetic to and encouraging about community-based alternatives to jail. So some of us were hopeful that he might be persuaded, and he voted, yes, he voted to authorize the budget increase. He said nothing about all of the comments. Everything that was said about the comments was mostly harsh about, you know, how people fail to understand this, that, and the other thing. And he cast his vote. Now there is, and it was devastating, there is a slight silver lining that we are holding on to, which is that he said, I'm going to vote yes, because we need to have this blah, blah, blah. And then he added quietly, but my vote is contingent on moving forward with reducing the mental health population in the jail. So he said that, he sort of tacked that onto his vote and left it sitting there. And we are prepared to jump all over that, and have already begun to jump all over that, and demand, let's see the plan, let's see the timetable, let's see the numbers, let's see how we're going to make this happen. And we're ready to work with you and all the other advocates for this kind of reform. And they are widespread in the county.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. I didn't hear that last piece about his butt.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful thing, and to hold his feet to the fire.
That's right.
To be able to continue to move towards decarceration of Santa Rita Jail. So I'm hearing, Myrna, 2 silver linings. One is what Richard Valle said, his butt, his contingency.
Yeah.
And the second thing is just the incredible strength and the power of the people protesting against this proposal, yes, and how much they spoke out, and that's something we can marshal in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was so impressed with that, because it went on for hours. It really went on for hours. That we started before 2. I didn't get off until 6. And it was still going when I went off. People were still trying to get comments in after the vote. Yeah. It was really, it was dramatic and powerful and inspiring at the same time, that it just really left you mystified that something like this could happen in the face of such strong opposition. It just means we have to be stronger. We have to be stronger, louder, more powerful.
Yeah. And the movement is growing. the voices of opposition, us joining together, has grown enormously over the last couple of years.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Myrna, thank you so much for walking us through this.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say to people who you want to have more information, you can please feel free to contact me, KarenRachels@gmail.com. If you want to join the Economic Justice Committee, we totally invite you. We need you. Myrna, I don't know if you want me to direct people to you. Would that be comfortable for you?
Well, I think, people can come to me. I will almost certainly direct you to Richard, who is really, really, really the guiding force in this, in all of this work. And there are several of us who are trying to sort of work behind him and make it happen. So yeah, me, Richard, and a number of us, yeah.
And Merle Lustig is the other person.
Merle Lustig, yeah, absolutely.
And Laura Finkler has done some work as well. So really excellent work happening, through the EJC on the Interfaith Coalition. So I will just keep, instead of giving people more things to remember, I'm just going to again say my email, which is KarenRachels@gmail.com. Thanks again, Myrna. Lovely talking with you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.